Welcome to Holy Week. We're so excited that wherever you are today, you took time out to be with us right here. And we encourage you, wherever you are, to make sure you subscribe on YouTube, follow us on Facebook, check in, and even share what you're about to experience today. Every single day, we're going to come to you live at this time so that we can walk through the final days of Jesus' life here on earth. As we begin Holy Week and as we walk through these moments together, each pastor is going to take an opportunity to share with you the final days of Jesus' life. Welcome to Holy Week.
Of Lent for many weeks now, a time when we've been preparing our hearts to celebrate the resurrection of our risen King. And in today's story, I want to share with you something that Jesus did that was very, very special, not only to people who were around him at that time, but for those of us today who still choose to follow him and do things because of what he's doing in our lives. So Monday, Jesus walks into Jerusalem and he's received with mixed emotions. We heard Tuesday about how we can offer up ourselves to surrender and obedience to Christ. And today, it's Wednesday, and Jesus is still. Now, for today's story, it comes out of the book of Mark, chapter 14. And Jesus has come into Jerusalem with disruption. He presents the unexpected, and those who were around, because of them, were already plotting to kill Jesus. They have been just taken for a ride because of what Jesus is still teaching. Now, take this in consideration. Jesus is in his last hours, and he is still pointing people to the kingdom. He came to set the record straight even in the last week. And today, he finds himself in the home of Simon the leper. Now, here's something really interesting. It's Wednesday, and Jesus is still loving on those who were the unlovables. Jesus is still giving of himself to those who were still willing to listen to him, those who were still wanting to follow him, and those who still needed to be pointed towards the truth. And here they are with others around having dinner. The story tells us that Jesus is in the home in Bethany of Simon. And as they're sitting there, he is reclining. And others around are just having conversation with him. And as they are doing this, in comes a woman. And she comes in with an alabaster jar. All right? This alabaster jar was full of perfume. And as others are talking to Jesus, she makes her way over to Jesus and she cracks open the alabaster jar. She cracks the lid and does the unthinkable. She begins to pour it over Jesus' head and feet. Now let's stop for a second. An alabaster jar, if you're not familiar with this, we hear that it was like a jar of perfume. Alabaster is a stone, a very expensive stone that was used back in the day, and we understand that it was also used as one of the stones to decorate Solomon's temple. So this was not a cheap piece of stone. But here she is with it filled with perfume, which is another thing we got to talk about. Perfume back in those days, we hear in this story that it was that amount that she had in the jar was enough to be of a year's wages. So not only was the jar valuable, what was inside the jar was even more valuable. And she cracks open and starts pouring it over Jesus' head and feet. She's anointing Jesus. She's giving something of herself. This was a deliberate act, an intentional moment where she took something that had value to her and she breaks it open. And she gives it a God. She just gives it over as an act of worship. Now, that perfume was valuable to her and to the others that were in the room. But Jesus understood what she was doing. She takes that and she starts pouring it over Jesus. Jesus understands that this was an act of brokenness. Let me ask you a question. Have you ever broken anything? Have you ever deliberately taken something that was of value and broken it? I know I've broken things in the past, but did you have an agenda? Did you do it with an intention? This woman did so. This was not a mistake. She understood that value of what she had, and she broke it open. She came to Jesus with it broken. Jesus did not need her perfume. Jesus wanted her brokenness. Let me ask you this question. What can you or what are you willing to break today for Jesus? This woman did it as an act of worship, but not everyone in the room. Not everyone in the room understood what she was doing. They did not understand that she was coming from a place of brokenness and just giving this to Jesus. This was a surrender of something of value. I remember surrendering to Christ. When I first gave my life to Christ, I just accepted him. I started to live for Christ. But I still held on to some things that were of value to me, some things that I was not ready to hand over to Jesus. But it was months later when God started to do a real work in my heart. And he just challenged me. He called me on such things and said, just give these things over to me. He said, Will, you value these things? I have better plans for you. Hand them over. And it was at that very point in 2011 when I actually just surrendered everything to Christ. Just on Monday, we heard Johnny talk about opening up all the rooms and giving everything, not keeping Jesus out of any area of our lives, just giving all the areas of our lives over to him. But it was that moment for me where I was freed up because I actually gave up something that I valued, not understanding what Jesus was going to do when I handed it over to him. And that's what the woman was doing with her. The response in the room was just crazy. As Jesus is sitting there being anointed, the ones in the room are complaining, saying, hey, what is she doing? She's wasting this perfume. She's wasted this jar. They saw that of value because it was of value to them. They did not understand where she was coming from. So they started complaining and just agonizing the woman. But Jesus' response was priceless. In Mark chapter 14, in verses 6, you hear how Jesus says, hey, leave her alone. He said, leave her alone. Why are you bothering her? She has done a beautiful thing for me. The poor you will always have with you. And you will be able to just do things for them from time to time, but you will not always have me. Jesus was making sure that they understood that what she was doing, she could do because she wanted to. Jesus said that she did so because she could. Let me ask you this. Are we giving things up out of brokenness to Jesus because we want to, or because we can't? Because she gave all she had over to him. Sometimes we just want to hold on to things. And she told Jesus, here it is. This is all I have. I'm going to give to you. Jesus pretty much rebuked those in the room, saying, you have no understanding what she's doing for me. You don't understand what this means to her. But today, we have to ask ourselves that question, a very important question. How are we coming to Jesus? How are our hearts dealing? What are our hearts dealing with today that we need to hand over to Jesus? To her, it was an alabaster jar that meant a lot. You can go out to the store and buy perfume in any kind of just jar, and it'll cost us nothing. It'll cost us just a couple of dollars. To her, it was something of value, and she gave it up. Let me ask you guys today, what are you willing to give up? What do you have? Look around. Search. Ask God to search your heart and say, hey, what am I willing to give up today that will transform my life? Because that alabaster jar, when she broke it, she knew one thing. It would never be put back together again. It was done. Some things we can glue together. Some things we can try to piece back together. That was not the case with this jar. And she did it deliberately. So again, what are we willing to break for Jesus today? I ask that because when you give something to Christ, when you pour yourself and say, here it is, Jesus is not going to try to piece that back together and restore you. All right? He's going to do something better. We're giving something up, and he's going to take that brokenness, and he's going to restore us. He'll redeem us. He'll give us his will for our lives and take things of value, and he'll give us things that are valuable to him, for you and for me. Now, with that being said, let's go back to that room. As you're sitting in there, there was two types of people. There was two types of them in the room. One, you got the guy sitting around the table and those that were surrounding there. Two, you have the woman. So I'll ask you this. Are you one of the ones sitting around the table criticizing the woman's acts? Are you one of the ones sitting there going, no way, that's a value, I will not give that up. I would have never done that. Or are you the woman who was broken and offered her brokenness over to Christ and said, I am giving you everything I have? We have to wrestle with that question because of the fact that we need to assess our lives and understand what it is that we value. I say that because if we're not careful, our flesh, all right, our fleshly desires, our fleshly lenses that we look at life through can hinder us and hinder what Christ is trying to do in us and through us. And keep us from a real, transparent relationship with Jesus. All right? So, if we can choose to follow Christ, if we can choose to give up for Christ, if we can choose to break something today, it could be the smallest thing. Doesn't mean it has to be something huge. But if Christ is calling you and you are being tugged at, I pray that you would take that step, that next step, and break it. Why is that? God has a better plan for you, and he has things for you that will bring value to your lives and to the value of those around you. Our surrendering to Christ and giving up on such things is a blessing. The woman understood it. Those around the table kind of didn't. But I love the fact that even in the moment, Jesus did say, leave her alone. And what she has done for me today, for as long as the gospel is preached, she will be honored and remembered. So we're here talking about that moment in history. What are you willing to break for Christ today? He enjoys our brokenness. He wants our brokenness. He wants to make us new. Genesis Church, we're glad that you joined us today, wherever you may be watching. We just pray that you will continue to just join with us through the remainder of the week as we continue to get ready for Easter. Grace and peace.
Thank you for joining us today. We want to remind you that this Friday is Good Friday. At 12 o'clock and 7 o'clock, we have 2 identical services. There'll be communion, there'll be classic worship, and there'll be time to reflect and respond upon the events of that day. We will be streaming both of those on YouTube, on Facebook, and on our website. And don't forget, most importantly, this Sunday, 8 o'clock a.m., 9:30 a.m., and 11 o'clock a.m., there are 3 identical services as we celebrate Easter together. You don't want to miss a moment of any of it, and we'll see you there.